Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff, and I'm here with Shane Buckley, President, CEO, as well as Joe Slowick, Senior Manager, Threat Intelligence and Detection Engineer at Gigamon. So, welcome. I'd like to first start, Shane, by congratulating you as your new role as CEO of Gigamon. Congratulations. They're very lucky to have you, and your reputation certainly precedes you.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you.
Thank you. So, Shane, can you define deep observability for our viewers, and how does it differ from visibility?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, first off, observability has been around for quite some time, and it really is a non intrusive method that organizations have used for many years by DevOps and CloudOps to understand how systems are working. Observability typically uses metrics, events, logs, and traces, often referred to as MELT, in order to understand what's happening inside an application. Here's the big challenge, though. MELT is mutable, and oftentimes these logs during a security breach can be either turned off or, more perniciously, they can be overwritten by nefarious actors giving false information to the security operations center. And so therefore it becomes unreliable. Now, the deep part comes from the fact that we actually provide this information from network traffic. And in fact, we go farther. We go into the layer 7 or deep packet inspection to pull out application metadata from this network traffic, and we reformat it and make sure we can send it to the variety of observability vendors such as New Relic, Sumo Logic, and Datadog. And it's a pipeline then because we actually provide a flow of this high fidelity traffic to these tools in real time. We extract metadata from this network traffic, and metadata is important because it is reliable, scalable, and it's also very, very affordable, and it's standards based. And so when you look at the technique we use for deep observability, this is very, very similar to what we've done for about 15 years for some of the biggest, most complex, and most secure networks in the world when we actually talk about visibility. But it is observability because we are extracting this rich metadata, which can be used by many different tools, not just security stack, but also application performance and network performance as well.
Well, that's a great explanation, and certainly extremely important in our cybersecurity world today. And information like that is definitely needed, not a need to have, but certainly a must have. So thank you for that. And Joe, in the past year or so, we've seen a tremendous change of pace in the threat landscape. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are for security professionals today?
I think the biggest challenge is we are increasingly moving towards a hybrid environment, whereas we're used to having networks fairly self-contained and isolated as on-premise installations, and the pace and direction of technology is moving things into hybrid cloud installations, off-prem, software as a service, etc. And so it reduces or eliminates the firm boundary that used to exist between trusted networks and the untrusted internet. And by having the ability to analyze traffic moving between enclaves, between zones, is really a necessary function to, these are trends that we're not reversing anytime soon, and adversaries are taking advantage of them through poorly designed or poorly implemented hybrid cloud implementations, or through offshoring or similar distributions of services. And without getting insight into what those traffic flows are, it becomes very difficult for organizations to even know what is happening, malicious or otherwise, within those networks, let alone respond and counteract those threats.
No, interesting. And certainly with the new hybrid environment, a lot more has to be looked at in a whole different way that we haven't in the past. So, Shane, why did Gigamon decide to enter the deep observability space? I know you explained it and explained the difference between that and visibility. And what are your priorities this year? Because that is certainly something that I think a lot of companies would be very interested in knowing.
Yeah, great question, Shara. I would say, first off, as I mentioned earlier on, Gigamon currently exists within the largest, most complex, most secure networks in the world. We have generally protected on-premise and private cloud networks for many, many years. But as companies look to hybrid cloud and the ability to move workloads to public cloud infrastructure, sit inside containers, they want to be able to move freely these workloads in line with their business needs. There's a huge problem that they're facing, and that is public cloud networks suffer from the inability to really secure them as you move across these multi or hybrid cloud environments. And so our customers came to us probably 3 or 4 years ago now and said, you got to help us. we rely on Gigamon to ensure that we provide the right network application performance, but also security capabilities for these big networks. And so we've spent the last 4 years developing our products so that we can extend the capabilities that we built on premise for some of these biggest organizations in the world right now into public cloud. So it's definitely a very important thing to do. When you look at the research, CISOs will tell you that their top priority right now is security for hybrid cloud. There is no defined method to do this today. And we believe that our deep observability pipeline strategy is the solution, is the panacea to their needs. And so it's partially because our customers asked us to move into this market. It's also partially because this is currently the only secure way of providing this layer of information, observability, actionable intelligence to security tools, to application performance tools across the hybrid cloud. And so this remains a high priority for us as a company. We think it's a huge opportunity, not just for Gigamon, but also for industry and for organizations to provide the level of protection that they need for this growing important space.
Oh, certainly. And we see where we are today. How do you actually see this evolving over the next number of years? Because as we see what cybersecurity needs are today, they're very different even a year from now. And certainly you've targeted what we need and what the pain points are and where organizations really need to have that visibility. How do you see that evolving?
It's a great question. So when we look at the statistics in 2021, 2/3 of all US organizations were hacked and had ransomware claims put upon them. And about 50% of those, about 1/3 of organizations paid ransomware. And as I'm sure Joe will can talk more about, this is not going away. In the cat and mouse game that we're in, the mouse is winning, not the cat. And so our job going forward is to ensure that we enable our customers to be able to move their workloads in whatever way they want. We are Switzerland when it comes to this task. So we enable customers to move a workload from on-premise to a private cloud inside a container to a public cloud and back again. The other research that came out recently from Goldman Sachs is that the migration to public cloud has been a lot slower than analysts had originally predicted. And to date, only about 21% of all workloads are sitting inside public cloud. And customers are now looking at options. They need the optionality of providing the workloads to deploy wherever they really want them to. In many cases for these big organizations, compliance and security actually trumps the ease of deployment, scalability that comes with public cloud. And so we're seeing organizations make tough decisions about where they put their workload. And our job is to enable that journey for many years to come.
Well, that's a great explanation and certainly a great insight. And so, Joe, based on what Shane just said, the past year or so, we've seen a tremendous change of pace in the threat landscape. What do you think some of the biggest challenges are for cybersecurity professionals today, and how can deep observability address these concerns?
I think a challenge facing most organizations is trying to derive sufficient signal from the overall noise of application traffic, user traffic, and legitimate like or activity from malicious behaviors that are occurring, because we've seen adversaries increasingly migrate towards abuse of legitimate communication pathways, legitimate applications and utilities in order to further malicious actions. In doing so, if you look at some examples from the DFIR report on some ransomware engagements, in as little as 4 hours from initial access. And so that really puts defenders in a difficult position of having to rapidly discern malicious activity within their environments, but also trying to distill that malicious behavior from the noise of everyday operations going on within their environment. And along with those, you have adversaries that are increasingly aware of and able to circumvent tools and various ways of trying to identify that activity, which is why having a position of packets or it didn't happen, which is kind of the position that we take here at Gigamon, is very beneficial so long as we can distill the traffic of specific interest from everything else that's going on. And it's not easy, but it's kind of where defenders need to go in order to keep pace with what adversaries are doing.
Oh, interesting. And Shane, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say, really to follow on from what Joe was saying, the power of our fabric and platforms is the ability for customers to pull out as granular information as they require to whatever tools that they require at any time. Given how fast these networks are working today, and typically in these large organization networks, there's a packet received every roughly 20 nanoseconds. And so the challenge the organization has is, what can I do in 20 nanoseconds to protect my infrastructure? Very little. You can look up memory in about 10 or 15 nanoseconds. So there's very little you can do inline to actually protect the infrastructure. And so our job really is to make sure that we remove all the unnecessary, irrelevant traffic that the customers are looking at, to make sure they are looking at the most important events potentially that are happening inside the infrastructure. And the combination of our deep observability technology and our network detection response technology, we call it Gigamon Threat Insight, that is really a 1 + 1 = 8 or 9 for customers, and really provides much better protection, gives them more time to really see what's going on, so they can make some important decisions as to what traffic should go in and out of these networks.
I think that's super important. It's always that, what is all that noise that we're dealing with in the cybersecurity world? So much information coming. How do we distill it? How do we actually get what we typically need, or that we need at that moment in time? So that's critical. So that's great to hear. So to that point, Joe, what solutions does Gigamon offer that allows customers to realize the promise of deep observability for real-time strategic business decisions?
Well, as Shane has noted several times, there's an entire ecosystem of Gigamon solutions that, depending upon the appetite and the maturity of the organization, can be employed. I personally am very in favor of the Threat Insight product, because it happens to be what I primarily support. But the reason is because a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of not just getting deep observability to what is going on, but also processing that observability into actionable items is the core of what we do within Threat Insight. So the first layer is certainly getting observability into the environment that's being monitored and defended. But once we've met that prerequisite, to then refine that observability into actionable items for a security operations center, for an incident response team, by applying a combination of intelligence analysis of the threat environment, as well as data science and data analysis of actual intrusions and attacker lifecycle operations, to then come up with high fidelity alerts and alarms that allow a security organization to respond to events in a reasonable fashion, ideally as close to those events as possible, without being inundated with significant noise and inactionable items that only cause a waste of time for organizations to get lost in too many items firing at once.
No, interesting. And that's been a pain point, certainly, in most organizations. So that's very critical. And Shane, I'd like to come back to you at the end here and ask if there's any last thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers, in terms of any specific areas around Gigamon, your thoughts in the cybersecurity space, or really any last thoughts you'd like to share with our viewers.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I would say, speaking directly to CISOs and security professionals, hybrid cloud and cloud itself is simple until it isn't. And at times it can be very, very complex. And from a security perspective, as I mentioned earlier on, securing hybrid cloud is the #1 priority for CISOs. My advice and counsel is always make sure that anything you do gives you optionality, can give you the options to do whatever the business requires you to do. And by providing deep observability pipeline, I believe Gigamon can enable CISOs to make the right decisions based on business needs, to move workloads precisely where they want to go. Make sure that you have a solution that is truly Switzerland in the mix, and that does not have vested interest. We'd love to have conversations with CISOs and other security professionals on this great development in technology. We believe we've got a great solution. For many of you out there, it's about extending your fabric into the new way of working, the hybrid cloud. And for some of you, it may be a new relationship. Either way, we'd love to have a conversation with you.
Well, thank you, Shane, and thank you, Joe, for your time, and thank you for sharing your insights with our viewers. It was a pleasure speaking with you both today.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.